Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. Now, there's another very interesting article that's been brought to my attention, and thanks, Jane. Really, really good article. It's got far more balance in it, which is a surprise. But this is the Express paper. I think it's in the UK. I'm pretty sure it's a UK paper. And they're talking about Eskom. Now, you might recall in the live stream we had on Sunday with Simon Roche, he raised the point that if the whole grid goes down, depending on how long it takes for them to start trying to resuscitate it, will dictate on the length of time it'll take to actually achieve that. And he made the point it could take up to 18 months if it's down for too long. Now, this point is ratified in this article, and that's why I think this is quite relevant. The article states South Africans will be heading to the polls on Wednesday, May the 8th, in an election which will test the ruling party's mandate to fix the country's deep-rooted problems. Amongst them, voters will be considering the corruption which snaked through the political landscape for years under now-ousted President Jacob Zuma, but which continues under Ramaphosa at all levels of government. One knock-on effect felt by the population as a whole is the condition of the state-owned electricity supplier, Eskom, which has been fuck-a-moneyed. Eskom supplies some 95% of South Africa's power. In recent years, it has fallen into desperate disrepair, leaving South Africans across the country quite literally in the dark. Yeah, South Africa is going back to the dark continent. I mean, that's what's actually happening. You know that historically, when the first missionaries went through South Africa, this was back in the 1700s, and they started traveling inland and looking around and trying to convert people to Christianity and so on. And they were the ones who first labeled South Africa the dark continent because everything was so backward in the country. There was no wheel, there was nothing. There were just huts and people walking around herding cattle. That was it. Oh, there were a few crops around the place too. But, the whole country was just back in the dark ages. At least 1/3 of Eskom's power stations are broken or shut down for maintenance, resulting in load shedding across the country. Planned blackouts are scheduled to spread out electricity demand and prevent the entire grid going into shutdown. The severity of the load shedding depends on the demand, and blackouts are rolled out in stages which range from stage 1, the least severe, to stage 4, the worst, which sees customers without power for 12 times over an 8-day period in 2 to 4 hour blocks. Eskom is keen to point out that without load shedding, a complete blackout is inevitable, which could take the entire system off the grid for weeks. In a statement, the supplier said a countrywide blackout has serious consequences, which can occur when there is too much demand and too little supply, bringing the power system into an imbalance, tripping the power system into its entirety. We would need to energize one power plant at a time and one section of the country at a time. It could take up to 2 weeks to restore full power, which would have a severe impact on our country. This is why we are load shedding or load reduction, to effectively manage our power system and assist in protecting it from such an event. But while the supplier is keen to downplay the severity of the situation, the fact remains there is no clear way to permanently fix the situation without massive economic overhaul. Speaking at an electricity summit in Cape Town last month, Western Cape Premier Helen Zille said, "We have a crisis." Now, Eskom is probably one of the most corrupt state-owned enterprises in South Africa. And I mean, that's a pretty hard level to reach when you consider the corruption that is right through all the state-owned enterprises. But Eskom sticks out like a thumb because there are thousands of employees who've set up their own little businesses in a business name, and those businesses are sending invoices to that employee who has to confirm it's okay. And of course he does. And then the money goes back to that little business. It's a great job if you can get it. And that's just one example of dozens of ways that the whole system is corrupt. It is quite extraordinary. It's amazing that Eskom is still going, quite honestly. Anyway, it is anything but under control. And the most important thing we have to do is convey honest information to people about where we stand. South Africans have enjoyed a brief reprieve from load shedding in the run-up to the general election, as acting President Cyril Ramaphosa works to prove he has what it takes to get the country back to its promised glory during the Nelson Mandela years. Now, who did Nelson Mandela follow into government? The white government. That's why they were the glory years, because the country was surviving or thriving under the system that was left to the ANC. And in 25 years, they have just cactused it. They have just totally destroyed it. A veteran South African political journalist who asked to remain anonymous spoke to Express about the deepening crisis and the upcoming elections. He said Eskom was decimated by corruption during the Zuma years, and this corruption has continued under Ramaphosa. Eskom is seen by many as a metaphor for the government's failures and may persuade some voters to turn their backs on the ruling party, the African National Congress, or ANC. President Ramaphosa has been at pains to reassure South Africans that Eskom's troubles are being addressed. A high-powered task team is working on the issue, and there have been no blackouts for several weeks. On Easter Friday, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni granted Eskom an emergency bailout in order to meet salary demands and diesel costs, which opposition parties declared a political tactic ahead of the upcoming election. But as Eskom continues living hand-to-mouth, the country has been warned that there is a high risk of stage 1 load shedding in the upcoming weeks, and with South Africa heading into winter, this is not welcome news. Well, this is my conspiracy theory about what's going on with Eskom. I might be right off the track, but if I'm right, let's see what happens. I reckon what's happening with Eskom is that they're using diesel as an emergency way to keep the grid going up to the election. And they'll probably continue to do that for a week or two after the election. But I think then what they're going to have to do, because the cost of powering the electricity through diesel is huge. It is economically unviable. They can't keep on doing it. So they're going to have to revert back to these traditional coal power stations to try and keep the grid up. Now, we know they're in a state of collapse. So I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if before we hit the fourth quarter of this year, before September, the whole electricity grid in South Africa just implodes. And the worst case scenario that Simon Roche talked about in the live stream we had the other day could certainly come into play. If I was in South Africa and had any savings at all, I would be putting up solar power. I'd be getting off the grid, because I think that is going to happen. I think Eskom is going to collapse. And, of course, the ANC will have 4 years to make excuses and do what they do. Anyway, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed, and ring the bell, 2 little black things on either side, so you get all my updates, and have a great evening. Bye for now.